Today I've got the Nintendo DSi XL, which I just bought a few days ago. Now, I'm not going to give an in-depth review of the DSi XL since it came out about a year ago and it's been extensively covered, but I just want to give my take on it, especially since this is the first Nintendo DSi system I've owned. I've owned the original Nintendo DS, I've owned the Nintendo DS Lite, and then I went straight to the 3DS. Because when the DSi came out, you know, the larger screen on the DSi looked nice. I'm like, wow, it would be nice to have that just for the larger screen. And then they came out with the DSi XL, which is absurdly large. The screens are gigantic. What I recognized in the DSi was that it was really sort of a half step between the Nintendo DS platform, and the successor to Nintendo DS, which is obviously the 3DS, which is now out. And the reason I got this is because I just wanted to play specifically Pokemon Black in, like, you know, the grandest, most epic way possible, sort of like renting a big screen TV to watch the Super Bowl on or something like that. So I got the DSi XL after I got the Nintendo 3DS on launch day in the US. And so with that in mind, this is literally actually the first time I've touched a Nintendo DSi of any kind, let alone an XL. So, and what the DSi XL strikes me as, it literally strikes me as a half-baked Nintendo 3DS. You got your main menu here, and it has the music player. It can't play MP3s like the 3DS can. It only play, I think, .AAC files, which is a pain. Because yes, the AAC files are higher quality, but most of your music is probably going to be in MP3 format, and you have to go and convert it. It's just a mess. The Nintendo DSi shop, unfortunately, I will never use because I know that in a little while the Nintendo eShop will be out for the 3DS, and it's going to be much better than this. So I can't really talk about the games or the interface. I just heard that the interface was somewhat lacking and that the games are real hit or miss. Some games take great advantage of what the DSi has to offer. Some games were just really chintzy shovelware, or were really sort of held back by the memory restrictions of the DSi. And speaking of memory restrictions, we've got the web browser here, which I messed with for a bit, and I was not pleased. If I bought this thing for the web browser, I can only imagine what the web browser on the actual standalone web browser they had on a cartridge for the original Nintendo DS that you had to get a RAM pack for and put in the GBA slot. If I could only imagine if that, I'm glad I didn't pay extra for it like that, because this is not that good. If you're in a pinch and need a web browser, it'll work, but casually surfing the web, it's not going to happen very comfortably. Images don't load, it takes forever. For a system that could handle Super Mario 64 in real time, that could handle an online first-person shooter, Metroid Prime Hunters, it's kind of surprising. I can understand why, but it's kind of surprising that loading simple web pages, even my own SuperTrainStationH.com, which is deliberately made to resemble a low-impact, low-resource-intensive website from the late 90s, has trouble loading efficiently on this thing. So I wouldn't mess with that. Footnote Studio, I haven't messed with yet, but I mean, I know it's probably a lot of fun. And the DSi XL comes preloaded with some Brain Age stuff. Photo clock, I don't know what that is. I don't care. PictoChat with bigger screens, I'm sure. Might have a little tiny bit extra features that really don't matter. And music player, so that covers all the features really. And what's surprising for me personally, since I went into the 3DS was like my first time with experiencing a handheld a Nintendo handheld that had a real operating system, a real interface. So when I go to this thing, talking about the DSi being a half-baked 3DS, I press the power button. Basically acts as a reset button. You cannot exit the game and go back to the menu. You have to restart the system, and you tap the power button will restart the system, and it does it so fast it feels as though almost you're going back to a operating system, and you can go back and multitask a little bit, but that's not the case. When you press it, it just goes back to the menu, same as if you would shut off the system and turn it back on, except it doesn't show you the health and safety warning again, which is nice of them to do. And also the music player in this, you can't exit the music player and come back. Like if you're listening to a podcast or something, when you go back, you have to start from the beginning and cue it back up manually. So not a very effective music player for casually walking around listening to music. I know some people have been able to use it that way, but it would be more for the convenience of the fact that you have your DS with you anyway, not because it's a great music player. And for having a music player, you'd want it to have some sort of wired remote like the PSP, which I did own. And the cool thing about the music player is that it had a wired remote that came with it that lets you skip songs or pause it on the go. This one, you'd have to take it out of your pocket and open it and then pause it manually. And so for just casually walking down the street, your friend shows up and you want to pause it and talk to him for a second, it's not a very wieldy music player. But if you want to just set it up and in your car, if you have like a headphone jack in your car to listen to it, I guess it won't be so bad. So because of all the limitations, I'm not really going to use the music player much, or any of the actual DSi features, any of the DSi Wear Shop or the camera. The camera is not that great. It's the same as the 3DS one, except the 3DS one, the camera is not that great, but the fact that you could view them in 3D, the 3D quality is very good, so that makes up for the fact that it's a 0.3 megapixel camera. Very pathetic by modern standards. Obviously, they took a hit on the performance of the camera to make the system as inexpensive as possible. And real quick about the hardware itself, the DS, I believe the DSi sort of has a matte finish. This one, it's all matte except for the lid of the system has an odd sort of glossy surface, and it feels like the 3DS surface, except the 3DS, it's all sort of glossy. This one, only the top is glossy, and it's like they added a special coating, designed this into it just to make the top glossy. I wonder if that's to protect the camera possibly. The 3DS, it collects fingerprints, but you could just wipe it off very easily with your shirt or with an eyeglass cleaner. All the fingerprints just wipe right off. This one, if you make a fingerprint on it, if you're just casually handing it, it'll quickly get covered in fingerprints very quickly. And maybe that's an anti-theft measure, so if someone steals it and their fingerprints will be on it when you call the police and they could collect that as evidence or something, I don't know, but definitely a fingerprint magnet. Otherwise, it looks very nice. Even if I just take my shirt, just wipe it a bit, it's still a lot of fingerprints on it. You really have to clean this thing for the lid to stay clean of fingerprints. There is a strap hook here, and it comes with two styluses. There's the built-in stylus. Obviously, you have the stylus port. You can see how deep it goes into the system there. The onboard stylus. There's also a Mondo stylus, a nice big fat pen that you could hold. And there's no space to store this in the system, so if you want to just use this, I guess, to use at home. This system is really ideally suited for using at home. If you want like a nice, if you're at home and want to sort of make a home theater sort of experience for your DSi, for your Nintendo DS games, since you can't play it on the TV like you can with the Game Boy player and Game Boy Advance. You can see it's a lot bigger than the Nintendo DS Lite. Open these games up, and as you can see, the prepared Tetris DS here for you. You can see definitely that the DSi XL, the screens are bigger, and it's a luxury. It's just pure luxury, unless you're an older player, like the expanded audience sort of Brain Age, Touch Generations crowd. I did have a family member who was interested when Brain Age came out and buying a Nintendo DS for Brain Age, but could not see the smaller screen. So Nintendo probably should have came out with this back then, because if this DSi XL was out then, they definitely probably would have bought the system. But as for the traditional gamer, if you're really into the Nintendo DS platform and would like to see your games in like the nicest way possible, this is definitely worth the money. But if you do not want to spend the money for this, even if you have a little extra money to spend on this, do not get used to it. Do not play your friend's system. You will get so used to it, you probably won't be able to tolerate playing on this anymore. But once again, this is very much less you could fit it into a pocket. This, you will want to keep it in a purse or a backpack or something like that. It is definitely not a pocket wieldy system. It's less portable for casually bringing around with you. But if you're going on a long car trip or a plane ride or something where you're not going to be moving around much, it's not as much of an issue, the portability. So that basically covers everything I have to say about the Nintendo DSi XL. Definitely, you could definitely tell my limited experience. This is definitely sort of the half step between the Nintendo DS and the Nintendo 3DS. But I just wanted it for these big screens to play specifically about Pokemon Black and White, much bigger and than the most grandiose high performance way possible. So with that in mind, it's a good purchase, or if you're a collector. But really, it's nothing the Nintendo DSi doesn't have except the bigger screens. All I got this for was the bigger screens. So if you want a Nintendo DS with gigantic screens, this is definitely the way to go. And thank you very much for watching. And one other point, there's no Game Boy Advance port in here, as with the Nintendo DS and Nintendo DS Lite. It would have been nice to have a Game Boy Advance port just to see the games on that nice big crisp screen, but honestly, by the time they were designing this thing, the Game Boy Advance was years out of date. So it's not much of a surprise that they didn't have the Game Boy Advance port in there. And it probably would have ended up adding to the size and cost of the system, having to have that extra hardware and the cartridge port in there. So, it's not missed. I don't miss it too much. I know some people were kind of upset, but it's not too much of a big deal that it's missing the Game Boy Advance port. So that's the Nintendo DSi XL, and thank you very much for watching.